My most recent involvement with a golf course being constructed, and I'll say golf course, and when I think about golf turf, we are in the highest end of maintenance of turf. We certainly cannot let things drop down below specific standards. We can't let the greens have disease. We cannot let any of our turf fall below specific standards. Otherwise, from the golf perspective, we lose the playing surface and we lose the business. So when we think about taking that and transitioning it down into a sports field or into a park or a sports field or even a home lawn situation, that level basically decreases in a maintenance aspect. So when I got involved with the golf course I'm currently at and working on, I started out in the first handful of years as being fully conventional, and I say chemically minded. So it was high intensity cultivation practices. It was aeration many times. It was top dressing and verticutting and really being very disruptive to those surfaces, along with the need for an awful lot of synthetic products. Number one being fertility. So when our golf course was brand new, obviously the fertilizer was going on to make it grow in and become the surfaces that we needed. And then when I transitioned, or when the course transitioned a few years, I started to get into some problems. Now, I'll also go that all of these practices that we do in a traditional mindset for maintaining turf, there is no one to blame. There is no academic, there's no PhD, there is nobody to blame for where we are right now, because this has been a generational game that has gone through. So from the Green Revolution back after the World Wars were done, we transitioned to using those products into nutrients, into nitrogen fertilizer. We found out that it made things grow. God, we could solve the world with that issue because we could produce what we wanted to produce by putting this fertilizer on it. The problem is that the more you use the synthetic products, like I was on the golf course, the more I started to run into problems. And it was supposed to be making things better. What I found out that it's very quickly, 5 years into the process, started to make things deteriorate. So I questioned the whole process of conventional maintenance on turf. Why am I applying more products? Why am I putting more fertilizers down? Why am I needing more water? Because I'm developing what we call localized dry spots. Why am I needing insecticides? Why am I getting disease? Why am I getting all of these things? So I questioned why. Self-educated myself, traveled to Australia to learn with one of the great men in Australia. Most recently, and actually, if you go on to the LA Sanitation website, I believe there is a series of videos that were put on there by Nicole Masters, whom I also trained under, and she used me as a case study within those videos to see how you could transition away from synthetic products and still have a fantastic turf grass. Now, when we use synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, what we do is we break down the soil structure. So what we do is we eliminate what we call structure in the soil, which is airspace, which is drainage, which is that whole system that functions. And what we also do is we start to break apart the soil food web. We never ever think about soil. We think about fertilizing or watering the grass. That is the wrong paradigm to think about. What we need to do is think about feeding and watering the soil. That grass plant will get whatever it needs from the soil. And it doesn't matter what kind of soil you have. You know, people have said to me, well, that's okay, but your soil where you are is different than it is where I am. Well, yes, we have to take context into the situation. But one thing that was drilled into my mind when I really tried to take the agricultural principles, which are way farther ahead than anything in turf management is the fact that we still are dealing with a plant that grows in soil. So it does not make any difference whether it's a tomato, whether it is a pasture for cattle to graze on, or whether it is natural turf. We are dealing with a natural process. And when we start to throw chemicals into that natural process, that starts to break down. So when we have a natural system running that is feeding itself with nutrient cycling, which is taking carbon out, bringing it in, it spits exudates out from its root structure and feeds the soil organisms. If we don't have soil organisms there, there is no nutrient cycling. Thus, we have to apply fertilizers. Thus, we get into problems where we don't have the proper microbial population to actually make that system function properly. We all think of ourselves, we have an immune system, and our immune system is in our gut. Natural plants' immune system is in the soil. It is outside of their body. So if we have a very unhealthy soil, we are going to have an unhealthy plant. So if we think about working with the soil, then that plant forms a relationship with the soil. It's a synergistic relationship. The plant and the soil work together. We do not need to interfere with that process like we think we need to. All we need to do is be there and help it. So from a costing standpoint, long story to get to my answer to that. So when I was in the golf course situation, 5, 6 years into that, I was spending well over $130,000 just on synthetic inputs. So that was fertilizers and pesticides. When I made the shift and my mind transferred over to the regenerative approach or the organic situation, that reduced down automatically to about $40,000 to $50,000. So that is quite a savings from 125, 130,000 down to 50. But of that $50,000, I have about 40,000 that is biological products. So in essence, my synthetic budget has really dropped so much more than that because of my biological inputs, being composts and compost extracts and just natural products of fertility like kelp and a lot of those other biological things that feed the soil food web and feed the soil. The plant gets what it needs from the soil. So from the cost reduction standpoint, the answer is it is a drastic reduction when you make the paradigm shift away from using the synthetic fertilizers. So I am now, and I'll just end this quickly, I am now into about 12 years, 13 years into the transition of the golf course I'm on out of all these products. My turf is just as good, if not better than it was before. My maintenance costs are lower than they were before. Not only my inputs, but my maintenance costs. We used to collect clippings and take the clippings away. No longer take clippings away. I do not have an abundance of clippings because not as many are being produced in the organic or regenerative sense. Overall, the process becomes very easy to look after it. You assist it as opposed to trying to control it.